Thanks for staying with us. This is Daybreak. With me in studio, Professor Lukoe Atwoli, Mwalimu Kenechesa, and the Suba South lawmaker Karoli Omondi with me in studio this morning to discuss what many stakeholders are calling an education gamble. Yes, Honorable Karoli.
Yeah, Ayub, you see, when Kibaki introduced free primary education in 2003, the initial capitation was, I think, 1,020 shillings.
Primary, that is?
Yes, primary. And that is 22 years ago. The capitation now stands at 1,420, an increment of 400%. If you look at inflation, cost of goods and everything, basically, I think we have reduced the capitation in effect. Yeah? The purchasing power of the shilling now and then is quite different. For secondary, I think we started in 2008 at 10,625, and in 2017 it was increased to 22,244. 8 years later, we are still at 22,244. What I don't agree with, and Professor said the CS just told us the truth, when you say it is not sustainable, you are basically saying we cannot afford free primary or free day secondary education, which is not true. We can afford it. We have enough resources to underwrite those programs. The lie is we are not serious in implementing it. Because what should happen is the government should, in terms of priorities and allocation of resources, focus on education, because we know what education does to our country and to our society. But when we decide deliberately not to put enough resources, that does not mean we cannot afford it. The impression that was created last week is that free primary education or free day secondary school is something that is too expensive. Yeah. We cannot afford it. We cannot continue with it. That is the lie. Yeah, that is the lie. We can afford it. On this issue of ghost workers and ghost students, yeah. Again, as I said, it is just lack of government seriousness. We have BVR kits, biometric registration kits at IEBC that are used once in 5 years to register voters. Why can't we use them to register students? Why can't we generate enough data of who our students are using biometrics so that you can't lie to us? And if it's not the first time that the Auditor General is reporting about ghost schools and ghost students, but I've not heard anybody charged or prosecuted or taken to court for running a ghost school. It is just lack of government seriousness. So we cannot take incompetence of people who are supposed to be doing these things to turn around and say we cannot afford free primary education. We can afford it. Either we get serious and do it, or we just keep lying to people that we cannot afford it. In fact, I'll even go further. If you look at university education today, I was just asking Professor where he went to his undergrad, and I asked him whether he has taken a look at his old dormitory or hall of residence. Whenever I pass through State House Road, I look at my old hall, Dag Hammarskjöld, Hall 10. I see the same curtains 30 years later. If I go to Parklands Law School, it's the same thing. I mean, I have paid back my help. We are being told there's 48 billion of unpaid help loans. These people, they are Kenyans. Surely we don't know where they are. Those who have not paid this 48 billion back to support education in the university, and we are just lamenting about it. Nobody can tell us where these people are. Soon they'll be retiring, by the way, and you'll not be able to recover the money. But for me, I paid off my loan long time ago. And those in the private sector are the ones who are dodging. If you're in the public sector, for sure, you've prepaid back your help. But is the government telling us they cannot trace Kenyans who owe it 48 billion? Yeah. Is that really the situation? So somebody somewhere is not serious. And on this, probably we need to, just call people out. It's one thing to tell Kenyans, pay back your loan. But if you received a loan facility 30 years ago. You've enjoyed your life, you've looked after your family. It is time to pay it back and help others. But the government cannot tell us they can't trace people to pay 48 billion. No.
So how then, before we go to Prof. Honorable Karoli, because you have mentioned very critical points, and the Auditor General also pointed out failure of the National Education Management Information System, NEMIS, that you talked about to curb fraud. But the enrollment of ghost schools certainly happens by human action. And what then is the purpose of billions worth system if that then can be abused at the national center? That's the second question. And then the third is then to forestall such an embarrassing fiasco, more action needs to be taken, isn't it? And apparently that ironclad transparency is lacking at the national level.
Yeah, you know, the case I remember was one where some people were accused of defrauding the government on production of textbooks and some learning materials a few years ago, and they were actually tried and jailed. I think it was under Kibaki administration. What we have today is a situation where, not just in the educational sector, you saw it even with the SHA, where we said we are going to develop an information management system for 104 billion Kenya shillings. And I did question this in Parliament quite vigorously, because we are complicating very simple things and trying to make them look things that you think are nearer to taking people to the moon. As Professor says, vendor-led policy. This is what is called state capture. State capture is where policy is being done not for the public interest, but for private commercial interest. So a lot of these things, even in the education sector, instead of doing the right thing, we are very busy focusing on what system can we put in place and who will sell that IT system. What is so difficult about enrolling our students? I've proposed some bill. In fact, tomorrow I'm appearing before National Security Committee on issuance of IDs, ID cards, free of charge to students when they're still in school, when they turn 18 or if they'll turn 18 in 6 months' time. That system, if we combine it with a smart national identification card that will come in a few years with a chip that can enable you to vote and everything, we will have resolved so many issues. At the turn of 18, you'll get your ID, which will be a voter card, at the same time going into the IBC database and also going to the registration of persons database. These things are not rocket science, but we like to complicate things. NEMIS, that system is there, but why is it not working? It either means somebody somewhere is not capturing the right data, or they have the right data, but they're ignoring it. But the issue of ghost schools and ghost students, there's financial tracing. If the money leaves Jogo House to those schools, surely we can't trace it. It must have gone through banks. It must have gone through M-Pesa. It must have gone through some systems. Are we saying we don't have the capacity to trace those things? You know, lack of government seriousness should not be the reason why we destroy things that are working for our people.
Okay. Yeah. And Prof, coming to you, this disguised as fiscal responsibility, if we then are to trace back the original scene in 2013, then one pointer certainly is going to be at the inability to end the begging bowl culture, knocking on doors either in the East or in the West. But certainly in a society where the political class appears to prioritize its interests, is this also a push, further push down the aisle to further segment or stratify the Kenyan society in the context of education?
Thank you. I think starting with the last point about stratification, when the education system was being reformed, quote unquote, or changed, we raised concerns about the fact that we were setting up a system that was going to work only for people who have substantial resources themselves. In other words, it was only going to work for what we call the rich, and not the common wananchi. Because the system that was being implemented required a huge outlay of resources in order to deliver it with quality and equity. Unfortunately, many of these concerns are swept under the rug. A school in Nairobi, a public school in Nairobi, in one of the leafy suburbs, will have 100 times more resources than a school in some of the more rural areas in this country. And yet we are implementing the same curriculum in those schools. So we haven't really thought about this question of equity, and we paper over it, sometimes even by using the figures that we have budgeted, and we assume that this has fixed the problem. I think the bottom line is, as the MP says, we can afford, because in my view, there are 4 reasons you elect a government. Yeah. You elect a government to ensure that your children can go to school. You elect a government to ensure that when you are sick, you can access health services no matter what's in your pocket. You elect a government to ensure that the infrastructure is in place in order to enable you to pursue your own economic independence and freedom. And you elect a government to ensure that you are safe in your neighborhood so that nobody comes and takes what is yours. So when we elect the government, we are expressing ourselves and saying, we are putting you in place to deliver on these mandates, and we're giving you the resources through our taxes. So if you ask me, can we afford this? I will say, yes, of course we can afford this. Yes, of course we can afford a national security system. Yes, we can afford a national health system that works. We can afford a national education system that works. And we can afford the development of the infrastructure that we need in order to develop ourselves. The other thing that I would probably want to say, and again speaking to what Mheshimiwa said, I would ask this question: how many members of parliament have actually paid back their loans? Could somebody do an audit of that? And you'll discover that there's quite a huge number who haven't. And therefore, when you go back to them and tell them, let's put in sanctions against people who haven't paid their loans, they look at personal interests and say, no, wait a minute. Let's not be too hard on that. And this is the case in the public service as well. So the biggest difficulty here is dishonesty. There's dishonesty that permeates the public service in this country. And that dishonesty cannot be legislated away. We have tried. We have written laws about ethics and so on. You can't legislate morality. We've put it in the Constitution and say these are the things, the values that somebody must subscribe to. But the first thing we do when somebody is required to subscribe to those is that we say it's not necessary. In fact, we've now gone to court and said, no, you don't have to insist on somebody having met all these things in the Constitution when they're applying for a job in the public service, for instance. In other words, there are people who are supposed to get jobs in the public service who could not meet the constitutional threshold, and so we set aside the constitutional threshold so that these individuals can come in. So when you have a system that encourages that, when you have a system that promotes that, you cannot come back to me and say, we now have an electronic system that will ensure that people are honest. Which people will be honest? The people running the system are dishonest. How do you expect that system to ensure honesty? So at the end of the day, instead of a lot of the lamentations that we hear, it would be nice to hear that we have investigated, we found so-and-so who registered a fake school, he's been charged in court, he's been convicted, he's been jailed. We found teacher X who misused resources, he's been surcharged and been fired. We found MP so-and-so who has not taken care of his public responsibilities, and his office has been declared vacant. We're going to have a by-election. We found Minister so-and-so who was being proposed for this particular docket, but we've discovered he stole public resources when he was a public servant, and he's ineligible to do this. Can we see a lot more? Right now, we have people who Parliament has impeached, who are leading political parties. And the Constitution says you cannot hold public office if you have been impeached. We have people who have been convicted of crimes, all sorts of crimes, holding public office and running public resources. And so you can't turn around and expect the same people to enforce a moral code in the education system when they are seeing fraud, waste, and abuse. These are things that are familiar to them. These are things that they're at home with, and if you try and eliminate them, it's like eliminating them or eliminating them from the public system. So I think that is where we need to begin these interrogations. And a lot of introspection is required about our own honesty when we get into the public service. Yeah, and then does that honesty then extend, Mwalimu Chesa, to also relooking at
billions that are pumped into ghost projects, tenderpreneurs, inflated tenders, and unexplained delegations, especially if you look at what is pointed out as the expenditure for domestic and foreign travel for the executive alone amounts to billions of shillings. I mean, other than capitation being the lifeline for schools that are now choking, ideally, should we then reorient ourselves?
That is what we should do, Ayub. And just before I respond to that, I want to tell you that the issue of the ghost students, ghost schools, is actually a human-made mistake that is meant to benefit a few. On the ground, we have someone called the Curriculum Support Officer who mans about 4 or 5 schools and who can actually walk into that school and count students by numbers and inspect the register. Then from the Curriculum Support Officer, we have the Sub-County Director of Education, who also mans the numbers. From there, the list sends to the County Director to the Regional Director. So by the time that list reaches Jogoo House, it is an authentic list, both in soft and hard copy and on NEMIS. But how now Jogoo deals with those figures and adds more ghost schools, more ghost students, is what we should interrogate as a country. We have a whole committee in Parliament, Mheshimiwa, called Education Committee. I do not know what they are giving a priority if they cannot give a priority to streamlining the funding and the expenditure of the money that is sent to this funding. In Likuyani, last 2 weeks, we had a host of members of parliament, senior government officials in what we call a women empowerment program. It was happening in a school that had no classes. And they were contributing millions of shillings, 50 million. You are dancing in a school, and when it starts to rain, you have nowhere to shelter. And then you share this 50 million among about 100 women groups that are there. What is a priority? Do you then give these MP 50 million to put up a very modern classroom that is sustainable, or you give political tokenism? Today, if you are working closely with the Minister of Education, the PS, and the President, you can go to Jogoo House and say, my school requires 2 million. And actually, he will pay a visit. We've seen the Speaker of the National Assembly moving around schools, dishing out money and saying, today I have brought you 2 million or 5 million from Jogoo House. We are politicizing the running of education in this country, the funding of education. And this bad behavior has also extended to the commissions. For instance, you've seen the TSC, whereas it tells you that 25,000 teachers have been employed, 20,000 have been employed by members of parliament. Is a delegated responsibility.
Dishing them
Carol is given 20 letters to go and employ teachers in Suba. That's delegated and constitutional responsibility. We are on a wrong trajectory as a government. We must audit ourselves. We must make a decision as to whether we want to exist as a country or we don't want to exist. During Kibaki's time, public officers, including officers in the Ministry of Education and other sectors, were human beings. I am afraid to say that people who are manning public office today, out of 10 public officers, 8 are not human beings. They do not have a conscience. They do not have feelings. They do things that ordinary human beings, to be human, you must have some attributes. Like, how do you steal from a small child in a primary school? By refusing to send or giving a false name to it in their names. That is wrong.
Some are stealing from the sick as well.
Stealing from the sick. That is sad.
Yeah, and Honorable Karoli, coming to you then. If you have given an example of South Africa, but it turns out to be, if not the most unequal country on earth, one of the most unequal country on earth. Are we heading that trajectory in a society where today we are seeing the middle class holding up under enormous pressure because of a squeeze in budget due to taxation, and now a cost is pushed their way and those below them? How does then this turn out for the society and the prosperity that we talked about if we are to measure our progress by how we invest in education, how we invest in school infrastructure, and how as well we then expect a generation of innovators, entrepreneurs, and the leaders of tomorrow from the same system?
You are spot on. Actually, if you look at education outcomes, they are measured in you use 3 parameters to measure education outcomes. One is numeracy, ability to do basic math.
Yeah.
Languages, English, Swahili. And there's a technical term, that is called learning adjusted years in school, how long students stay in school. If you apply those 3 parameters, you can see there's inequality even within Kenya between regions. The ASAL, the arid and semi-arid areas, have low enrollment. Yeah, they have low numeracy skills, they have low language skills, and they spend less years. And you can even go further. There's again disparity and inequity between rural and urban schools. Those parameters show the urban areas have an advantage over the rural schools. But you can even go further. Within the urban setup, there's even a greater disparity between the low-income groups and the middle or high-income groups. So it is true that we have those inequalities. But the only way to address those inequalities are these deliberate interventions. Like people vilify NGCDF. I have done, when I looked at the numbers this morning, I called the CDF manager. I asked them, give me a breakdown of the number of classrooms that have been built or are ongoing for the last 3 years in my constituency. You will not believe the number. It's over 100. So today, when it comes to infrastructure, with NGCDF, people should put pressure on the CDF committees. There's enough money to put classrooms in most of these schools. Actually, in a period of 5 to 10 years, because most schools have, 100, 200, I think urban areas have even fewer schools, though they require more money to build multi-story. But infrastructure, in terms of classrooms and toilets, should not be something we are grappling with at the moment. There are enough resources within the NGCDF framework to go around, unless the people of a particular constituency are not very attentive to those resources.
And that's about 40% of the money you allocated?
Yes.
For example, how much did you receive in the last financial year?
We received 170 million. 170 million. Okay. 5% is for administration, 5% is for emergency, and then there are limits for education sector. But the transformation you see in the rural areas in the education sector, be they classrooms, laboratories, is because of NGCDF. And when utilized properly, makes a big difference. Giving children sanitation facilities, classrooms, teachers having administration areas. But it's not enough, but it goes a very, very long way. Where the problem is at the early learning centers. I don't know how many early learning centers have been done by counties in various areas. I don't know. But whenever I go to the village, I stand in a school, I always ask, in this school and the neighboring schools, what has NGCDF done? And they tell me. And when I ask about the other funds, we rarely hear anything. But for me, I think education is not one area we should compromise, because otherwise we take not just the future of those disadvantaged, but we disadvantage them more. Like it is very clear if we take away this capitation, you can imagine what will happen to the ASAL areas.
And but Honorable, before we go to Prof, Honorable Karoli is still with you then. Also, there are legitimate concerns regarding how also your colleagues in Parliament manage the kitty. Of course, your management style could be different, but there are also constituencies and parliamentary units in this country where you go, you don't see the value of that money that the Exchequer releases to the respective 290 constituencies. How then could this be improved if you have touted that as a lifeline in many cases? And what's your response to the CS John Mbadi, who has proposed the rationalization and the proposed merger of the National Government Constituencies Development Fund and the Affirmative Action Development Fund that is allocated to the women MPs?
You know, the NGCDF that is being implemented now is not the one that was first introduced in 2006, I think. And it is not the one of 2015 or 2017. This is very different. Actually, there's a lot of misconception. People think MPs have a lot of control over their CDF programs. What the MP does is, at the beginning, of the financial year, you sit with your constituents as their representative, and they tell you what the priority projects are per area. For me, I do it by polling station. So I would go to a polling station, which normally is a school, and the community convenes there, and they'll tell me we need toilets, or for us, our priority is starting a new school, or our priority are classrooms, or a laboratory, or those kind of things. And then they're all packaged together. There's the way CDF works is, when the money leaves headquarters, it goes to the constituency account. The MP is not a signatory there, has no role there. When it goes to the constituency account, it is then split into operations and development. Then it leaves the development account to this project account. So if a school is implementing a laboratory, the money goes to the school. Then there's a project committee in the school that oversees the implementation of the project. And they are the ones who sign off that the project has been completed. They supervise. There's a team, not the MP. And once it is finished, it goes back. That is why in CDF, there are no pending bills. And then the rates for construction are regulated by Ministry of Public Works. So this is the only fund that works for Kenyans, NGCDF. There is no other that works. None. If there is, I challenge you, tell me.
That is debatable.
Tell me which one.
And we must challenge Mheshimiwa.
Tell me which one.
Mheshimiwa could be using his example, and perhaps he is doing the right thing in Suba. But Mheshimiwa, most of your colleagues are rogue in terms of the use of CDF, and I'll tell you why. Today I'm an advocate. I'm in court with one of the former MPs who is trying to control the sitting MPs on his former projects because he could not complete the projects. Money was misappropriated, and now he has to go knocking doors of the executive offices to come and complete while he's out of parliament because ESS is going for him. MPs have been expelled by the law to control and sit on CDF committees to try and to stop from micromanaging their committees. They have completely refused to respect that particular.
Let me clarify something.
They've been expelled by the law.
Let me clarify.
I think he stated clearly on the level of management levels.
That is theory. That is theory. Now, when you go into the ground, those CDF committees, I can tell you for free, they are puppets of sitting MPs. They cannot challenge a sitting MP. They cannot. If you get an honest MP, he will use the committee as well. If you get a rogue MP, he will convert that particular committee to rubber stamp whatever that. The MP has to go through the bursary list, for example, before it is released. Why should he be doing that?
Let me clarify something. For me,
yes,
the way we deal with bursary in my constituency, at the beginning of the financial year, we know how much is coming. We agree on the amount. They'll tell me, the CDF committee, that we are allowed because the percentages change. Last year, they told me we will spend 48 million. I said, okay, fair enough. Spend it per polling stations. Divide it by polling station using population. So whether I won in a polling station or I didn't, it doesn't matter.
But do you think all the MPs do that?
Let me finish. Then a day is set and people go and they select. The Wananchi in Suba South select their beneficiaries themselves. I don't even know the list. They select themselves. And you are not, I said we are not going to waste time telling an old lady to go filling forms. They select. And they say, okay, this one will get this amount, this one will get this amount. And you receive, and it is recorded, the list is prepared and pasted at the door. And you can go and see them. They are there.
I think there's a foundational issue.
I think I want to say something. The fact that some MPs are rogues, the fact that some people are misusing CDF does not mean CDF is bad. Deal with the problem. The problem is not the CDF itself. Deal with the criminals. If an MP started a project and did not complete, arrest the fellow. If there's somebody lied that we did a project here, inspection shows it was not done, arrest the fellow. Yeah. As myself, right now I'm dealing with a case. Yeah. As right now in Suba South, where we discovered somebody was trying to manipulate contractors to receive some kickbacks. And I've already reported to Mr. Mbuno. We are trying to deal with it.
Okay.
Yes.
I think
CDF is not bad. Say some MPs are bad.
No, I think there's a foundational problem here. And the foundational problem is that when we wrote the Constitution again, we said we will have people's representatives whose role will be oversight and legislation and so on. We said we'll have a national executive whose roles are to execute policy, to execute the plans that are approved by our representatives. We said we'd have a judiciary that will adjudicate when there is disagreement. And we said we'll have independent offices and commissions to carry out very, very specialized tasks. That's how we wrote it into the Constitution. And then basically to demonstrate the mistrust of systems, we then go ahead and establish a parallel executive in the counties called CDF, run by, at the time, initially members of parliament, and right now still with members of parliament involved, and you can hear the various ways that they're managing this, some very well, some very badly. But it is a parallel executive in the county at the constituency level. Because we have a county government that we don't trust to execute at that level. We have a national government that we don't trust to execute in the constituency. These schools we're talking about, they are under the National Ministry of Education. If the schools do not have toilets, the ministry has a quality assurance unit that is supposed to go there and make sure that this place is quality. They can budget for those toilets, they can budget for classrooms. But because we don't trust that they will do that, we want to put money that is controlled by a parallel executive within the county to run. This is the same with the CDF, NGAAF, all sorts of funds that are being put under the control, nominal or real, of representatives whose role is meant to be oversight of the executive. So at the end of the day, at the end of the day, then we have this system. Some MPs interpret this to mean, this is my influence kitty. This is how I will go, and where I put the money, I will get votes as my, as the payback. And that's not how it's supposed to be. The solution here, in my view, and I think there have been many attempts to try and declare this and say, remove this thing because it is encouraging patronage, it is encouraging that begging bowl mentality and so on. Let the government, the national executive execute, let the county executive execute, and let our representatives hold them accountable. And those that are stealing, those that are misappropriating, let us see them prosecuted. And this system might be better. So that an MP would go to parliament and say, Minister for Education, I have a school where the children are learning under trees. We have allocated this amount of money. Why haven't you ensured that these kids have a classroom?
All right. Let me clarify something.
Yes.
And by the way, I would be happy if you could convene a discussion on NGCDF and invite me and all the critics, and we can go through it. Let me explain this. You remember our 2010 Constitution found the CDF in place. Yeah. So the focus has been how to make the NGCDF compatible with the Constitution. What the current legislation clearly says is that NGCDF is for national government functions. National government has its own constitutional functions, education, security, don't they? Article 6 of our Constitution equally says the national government or any state organ must devolve its functions and bring them closer to the people. So the national government by itself has a right actually to have a fund or to have a mechanism of taking its services closer to the people, and NGCDF is one of them. The problem is at the legacy issues. The earlier versions of NGCDF, the MPs had a very big role. But today, as a member of parliament, I am the representative of the people of Suba. That is what the Constitution says. I have a right to write a letter after consultations with them and say we want a school here. We want a toilet here. That is my job. Even though I do oversight, even though I do representation.
But who are you writing the letter to?
I can write, you see the NGCDF has a board.
So I hear you, but yes. who is in charge?
Let me tell you how it works. This is why I'm saying there's a lot of misinformation.
Yeah, the recipient.
What happens in the beginning of the year? Priority projects are selected by the common person at the grassroots. Yes? Yeah. Those proposals, let me finish. Those proposals are taken to the NGCDF board in Nairobi.
Across all the constituencies?
Yes.
And
they
it
is actually the MPs who write their priority projects based on what they want to take them. I have worked as a personal assistant to an MP.
No, let me finish. Me, I'm telling you what I do. What you are doing with your... I don't know.
So what I was
what
doing
you do might not be
what you do is not what is
I'm
done.
telling you what is in the law.
Yeah.
So
just tell us what happens, Mheshimiwa.
Let me finish. Those projects go to the NGCDF board. They are looked through, whether they meet the legal criteria. Some are rejected, some are approved. Then they are given a code. They are given a code. Once they have the code is how the money will leave Nairobi.
Which ministry is in charge of this? That you
Ministry of Planning.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So
Ministry of Planning.
So when you're writing your letter and saying I want a school here, are you writing to the Ministry of Planning?
No,
or are you writing
write it. I don't even write it.
Well, you said
Yes.
you can write.
Right,
Yes,
and
I
say
can
you
write.
demand this project.
Who would you be writing to?
Who are you writing to?
There's
to
a
yourself?
CDF committee. No, there's a CDF.
A CDF committee that exists in your other form.
Listen, chaired by the DCC.
Deputy County Commissioner?
Yes, on behalf of the national government. Not me. I don't even sit there. I've only been to my CDF.
You have your cronies.
I don't
there.
have my cronies. Those people are elected.
People who are there, most like they were your agents.
No.
They were your goons. People that you entirely brought to this committee.
No.
Implementing. And that is what happens.
They are elected.
Why are MPs afraid to sit back and let CDF work?
You call for a day. Call for a day. Call a day. You sit here.
Your case is unique. In fact, members will be surprised at how you are managing your kitty.
No, when I first said, no, you are right. When I first announced to the constituency that bursaries will be given per polling station on a specific day, and we sat down and we agreed PWDs, women, 50%, all the criteria. Some of my colleagues said, what is this guy up to? Today, their members of their constituencies are demanding the same. They are under pressure. I am telling you the truth. I don't want to mention this. They are under pressure. When I started, they thought it will not work.
All right.
And I think just one last point. What you will notice about all these funds that are a parallel executive, in my view, you will find that there is heavy expenditure on brick and mortar. Okay? Heavy expenditure on brick and mortar. And there's a good reason why anytime somebody in the public service wants to steal money, they'll take it to brick and mortar. Because that's where you'll have variations, that's where you'll have incomplete projects, that's where you'll have overpayment of contractors, that's where you'll have all sorts of things happening. And for me, that is my greatest fear, that we have created systems where the oversight is not as much as one would expect at the national level. And money is being spent in ways that are less than transparent. And so those constituencies where you are saying that, a member of parliament says this is what should be done, what ends up happening is that the money is spent on contractors that are connected to all these politicians and to all these public officers. So this is the greatest worry. Because and the MPs know when they have the Public Accounts Committee and Public Investment Committee and so on, they attempt to hold the national executive to account. So that if they misspent money, then there will be reports from the Auditor General that then they interrogate and they try and hold them accountable.
Same with CDF.
Now, the problem at the CDF level is that there are 300 plus different small units spending money on all sorts of small projects that become very difficult for someone to come and say, at the national level, we're holding you accountable.
Let's now, still on the same, and look at the statistics. And still on you, Prof, some 4,860,499 students, which is over 70% of all KCSE candidates from 2016 to 2024, were not placed in any form of post-secondary education, despite government efforts to expand university and TVET capacity. This is a red flag, is it?
Yeah. So when you go to post-high school education in this country, what has happened is that there was a shift in policy that was either explicit or not. And this shift of policy was to say, we are discouraging people from going to university. A decision was made at some point that we don't want people to go to university because, university education is overrated. And that is when they started this push for technical and vocational training. And a lot of investment was put in technical and vocational training. And universities today are grossly underfunded. And again, the same problem that you budget and they still don't get whatever is in the budget. And the money that gets to the universities is often misused, misappropriated, and so the universities are going down. So even those saying we are expanding, right now the Ministry of Education is talking about merging and shrinking the numbers of universities. So that's going to get worse over time. But even having done that, the TVET infrastructure is obviously not able to absorb everybody who comes out of our high schools. And so we have to think about this. And this still goes back to why do we take people to school? And here, it seems like we shifted and said we are taking people to school to become artisans, to go and do these vocational things. And a few of them, an elite few, to go to university and develop critical thinking capacities and to be innovation and so on and so forth. If we figure that out, I think in the Moi days, they had an argument that after high school, somebody should be able to, earn a living with their hands. There was that kind of thinking that when you finish high school, you should be able to earn a living with your hands and with your brains and so on. And so we wouldn't be worrying about the 4 million kids who have finished high school and are not going into a post-high school education. We wouldn't be worrying about them as much because we would know they already have the skills and knowledge that are required for them to take care of themselves. But we worry about that because we shifted goalposts and said you need to go and get a technical vocational training or university education for you to be complete at the end of the education system. So we are going to grapple with this problem. We have many children entering the population every year. Our population is very young. They need to have staff to keep them busy. And as long as we don't think about that, we are setting ourselves up for really huge crisis. All these goons that you're hearing people talk about, these are unemployed youth, many of them out of school. Crime is a product of young people who are unoccupied. Political unrest. You're hearing them in the street saying, we don't have jobs, we don't have this, university education is not accessible, and so on and so forth. So we're going to have these problems, and unless we fix them by thinking through the outputs from our education system, we're going to have a lot of problems over the coming years. I don't think even this regime, the current regime, will bear the biggest brunt. I think whoever is going to be in charge of this country in the next 10 years is really going to have it rough, because you'll have a huge youthful population that has had limited educational access, that has low employment, and that is restive, that are looking for something to do.
Okay. Yeah. And Ken, does this point to also similar problems and areas, given their vulnerability, as Professor mentioned, of crime, radicalization, and political instability, also in the case of the possibility of choking off schools following the capitation crisis that we had discussed? Is it a similar problem, a similar script?
It's a similar problem, and in fact we are creating a bigger problem in the next 10 years. Remember that Kibaki's free-day secondary education, primary education, gave us a generation of Gen Zs we are witnessing today. People who went to school, people who accessed this education. It's a very informative and informed group that will just dare you when you're not doing the right thing. Today, this administration is not funding education at all, which means in the next 10, 15 years, we'll have another generation which will be very versatile, not very informed, not thoroughly educated. This one is singing one term because they appreciate that the law says if a person does not perform, you do not give him a second. That generation will not even be able to read the Constitution and know what is there. It will come and face us, and it may be the generation that will completely destroy this country. This tells us that if you do not invest in education, you are investing in everything that is anti-society. And as Prof rightly puts it, what will motivate over 4 million students not to be placed in either technical and vocational or the university? And you also saw a number of students who qualify to join universities opting not to join university. It is because university education nowadays no longer inspires people it used to be. You know, during our days, making it to the university was the in thing. But today, someone can qualify to go to the university and is not motivated at all. Where is this person going? He has 2 or 3 brothers in the house who are not employed. He has 2 or 3 brothers who are doing border business, yet they have degrees. As a country, we must restructure ourselves. We must give hope to the children. We must give hope to those who are in school that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And I think the public culture of anti-intellectualism, which probably started in some way about 40 years ago, but has really escalated over the recent years, where we say education is overrated, where we dismiss academics, where we want to argue with academics when they're telling us this is what needs to be done, but we say, because I have the power, I decide what gets to be done anyway. And so we are sending the message to the young people that you don't have to go too far with the education system. What you need is lots of money and lots of power. And if you have that, it doesn't matter what else you have. It doesn't matter what your values are, what your morals are, what your education is. You get to decide what happens. This is a message we are passing to the young people. And to speak to a young person today and ask them what their plan is for life, what their aspiration is, what they want to achieve, they tell you, I want to have a lot of money. I want to have a lot of money, because with a lot of money, I have seen people with a lot of money who have power. A lot of money brings you prestige. A lot of money in this country makes your moral code the national moral code, and so on and so forth. So this is the message we are passing. This is why kids, you are saying, who are qualified to go to university are refusing to go to university, because they are looking for quicker ways of making money so that they can become influential and then go to parliament like Mheshimiwa here, and then stand on podiums and tell people what needs to be done, no matter what their level of education is.
Yeah, and is that attributed, Professor Silonio, to the depths of the moral decay that we are experiencing as a society, and therefore the material thinking?
Yeah, we've become very material, and unfortunately our role models were our politicians for a long time, because the national discourse in this country is around political leaders. And the political leaders that have historically been in charge of things in this country have not been the most upright humans. and we speak about it very easily. We speak about a president who grabbed huge acres of land across this country. And we speak about it as if it's just normal. And we even describe how he did it. We speak about a president who, amassed wealth and used to get money from public institutions in cash, in briefcases, being delivered to him weekly. We speak about it so easily, like, yeah, that's what presidents do. We have presidents who, have had interesting challenges in their past and even in the present. And we speak about it just easily. And those are the role models for young people growing up in the society. Those are the people they see every day on TV. Those are the people they see in the media. Those are the people who, when they say things, these things happen. And so this young man, you're asking them, go and study law so that you can become a very good lawyer and you defend the voiceless and blah, blah, blah. They say, but what is that? I don't need to do that. I just need to amass a lot of wealth, become politically powerful,
yes,
and then everything I say will go. I can defend that person with my voice instead of going to court and so on and so forth. In fact, they have coined things about why you need to go to court when you have resources.
And you hear jokes in Parliament that speaking big English is left for low MPs, that these people speak a lot of English, but they do nothing, they have no money. And so people, unfortunately, money is in the wrong hands in this country. It's in the hands of people who do not merit to have that money. It's in the hands of people who have done nothing with their childhood to guarantee them that particular money, and they think that money is everything. They do not know that there is a process, and the process includes a process of acquisition of education. So let the political class not belittle education, because this is killing the dreams of young people who love education.
Okay, Honorable Karoli, certainly to not appear to look like or heading in the direction of public betrayal, how then do we rediscover our national ethos through good investment in education?
I agree with what Prof has said and Echesa here. You see, education, as Obama described this, is not just a piece of paper that you went to this school and you got a degree. It's a set of your attitudes that you come out with and how you conduct yourself. And philosophers will tell you education is what makes a person a responsible and useful member of society. Without education, actually lack of education is more expensive than education itself. But as for me, as dire as the situation seems, I think we all should do our part. You in your profession as a professor, him as a lawyer. For me as a member of parliament, you remember I did mention to you, I've introduced a bill to change the national curriculum to deal with this moral quagmire in our country, so that we are going to have a compulsory subject alongside maths and English called nationhood science that will actualize national values and principles under Article 10, but also have elements of innovation and entrepreneurship. So that actually the Education Committee has cleared it. We're just waiting for a small report, and then the bill will be published for public engagement. But why am I saying so? Because if you look at countries that have progressed, other than having solid educational system, they also have national values that are not driven by legislation, are driven by habits. They are acquired by habits. People do them as a matter of course. This is the right thing to do as a responsible citizen, which we have all these values in our constitution and in our laws. But who teaches them? Who imparts them? So at least I've done my little bit by trying to bring Kenyans back to the path of virtue, and run away from decadence. But a few years ago, we had a PS, God rest his soul, Murugu, who was PS for youth. He made a presentation to us in the Grand Coalition, the National Security Committee, warning that if certain things were not done, the current anxiety and engagement you are seeing with the youth will happen. And it has come to pass. He warned us. He had a very elaborate presentation. That was over 15 years ago. He said, if we don't do the following, this will happen, because there'll be a youth bulge and there'll be not enough opportunities for them. Okay. I think what we should really be discussing also is how do we create jobs? How do we make this economy work for as many of us as we can? We may deride education, but it is better to have a graduate who is without a job than a person who is completely without education and is without a job. Okay. One is easier and more productive to deal with, you know. So, but there's a serious problem, with the way, as I've always said, the way our economy is structured and functioning. Yeah. It is not creating enough jobs. It's not creating enough opportunities for people. I think that's also a discussion that we should have. Finally, the risk we really run is if we don't give these youths opportunity, and we try to engage them too much in politics, and what I'm now seeing today, we will end up like Haiti. That is what happened in Haiti. Haiti started off by the political leaders creating youth gangs to help them in elections when they could not use the national police. Okay. Tuntun Makot, and you know what has happened in Haiti. Yeah, and most of those gangs who control the capital, Port-au-Prince, 80% of it former police officers. Correct. Following the breakdown of rule of law. So you mentioned a very pertinent point of a society, and this was what was written of Muhammadu Buhari, the late Nigerian president, when he stepped off a ferry in Liverpool in the UK. Young 18-year-old Muhammadu Buhari was struck by the city's orderliness. People had obeyed the rules. The rules did not even have to be written. The society just worked. So let's sample the feedback. The hashtag on X is Citizen DayBreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Octo at _Kamaz says the legislature has abandoned the common mwananchi. Where are the oversight voices when learners drop out over 5,000 Kenya shillings? Education is bleeding, not for lack of funds, but for lack of heart and honesty. We speak of free education, yet every year thousands of students are sent home for fees. Bursaries, CDF, county, NGAV, which means the National Constituency Affirmative Action Fund, national government, Elimu Fund, and politicized lifelines. If you are not our person in caveats, your future is paused. Peter says what we are witnessing today is education sector in
is worrying. Slashing school capitation from 22,000 to 16,000, of which less is disbursed, is devastating. University education has become very expensive to the common citizens. It's so sad. Yeah, Musoma says the problem has been Jogo House. We had one education PS serving under 6 cabinet secretaries since the day Kibaki left power until this year. Tell me why Ghost schools submitted presidential election results and got capitation, but parliament did not let the heads roll. Frank Orinde says MPs will differ on every other thing but CDF. Honorable Karoli is using sweet words to defend the CDF. Now, how many use the CDF wisely and with top-notch accountability measures? He explained this case. Sir Nixon Degure says it's time for the government spokesperson to rise up to the occasion and inform us promptly and accurately what the government is doing. We want to experience one government, one cabinet, and one voice. Thanks so much for your time, Honourable Member and Professor. This is also an observation from Ndindi, who is watching the broadcast from Laikipia. He says, unfortunately, we have a tendency of manufacturing confusions to cash in from it. That is what eats our education. It beats logic that professors who are supposed to espouse the apex of ethics and morality run down universities in plunder and corruption. The first conclave is on morality and ethical living. This in relation to what the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga had called for. Mwalimu, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated. Prof, asante sana.
Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure having you. Honorable Karoli Omondi, thank you so much.
Sana.
Well, you can be a good example to your fellow colleagues in Parliament.
They will lynch him.
And thanks to you too.
They are struggling to make it.
Yeah.
Because it is important for their own careers.
All right, and thanks to you too for waking up with us here on the broadcast. This broadcast was directed by a lovely lady called Lindsay. Up next is Sporty Monday, an interesting segment that Isaac Swiller will host with UK sports broadcaster Alan Myers on the transfers and the much-awaited arrival at the Emirates of Victor Gyökeres. Arsenal had been looking for a very clinical centre forward for a very long time. And I'm hopeful then that by May next year, then we, the Gunners, will be able to hold up the gun and fire back. Not sure about what the Red Devils have signed, but Steve Shitera will be there as well. Many thanks, and we'll see you tomorrow morning here on the broadcast. Till then, good morning.